7 years ago, a childhood friend of mine passed on very tragically in California. She was a single mother who was otherwise in good health. And on that very day, when these things started happening, she literally drove herself to the hospital. And unfortunately, she never left. Within just a couple of weeks, my friend Millisent was dead. She and I were born and raised in southern Nyanza, which is in the western part of Kenya. And we went to the same primary school, so I have known her and her family almost my entire life. But of course, we went separate ways. She went to a different high school, I went to another high school. And life happened. I moved to the US, and then she followed a few years later. But we didn't meet until almost 30 years later when we met in California. Now, at the time of her death, Millicent had young kids both in Kenya and in the United States. And without blood relatives in the US, I don't believe she was, excuse me, I don't believe she was documented either. We had the task of figuring out how to get her body back home. So I'm going to tell you some more about this beautiful young woman that passed on. I believe it was in 2018. And hopefully use her story to show you what it really takes to navigate issues of death when a diasporan dies in diaspora and has to be brought back home. But before we do all of that, welcome to Karating, my friends. This is a very typical morning in paradise. As always, I begin my day with my morning fruit picking routine. I walk around because I have fruits literally in every corner of the property. And there's always something in season. Half the time, I don't even know that I have very ripe fruits somewhere within the property. So much so that we have so much that we are able to share with the birds and animals and people who work for us, people who are able to come within the property. There's a lot of fruits within the property. One of the things I really enjoy about living in the village. In my home in California, I have a avocado tree, I have a guava tree, and I think there's a third. Oh, and I have mapera that I just planted, which seem to be taking too long to get to the point where they're producing. But here, there's pawpaws, there's everything, every sort of fruit you can think of, tropical fruits for most part, around. So it's something I really enjoy, and so I'm just doing the normal routine, cleaning up and setting things up before I head out to handle construction issues in different parts of the country. So if you're joining us for the first time, you've never watched our channel, I don't know where you've been, but I'm a Kenyan American who is doing everything possible to return to this amazing place. I spend my time both in Kenya and in Long Beach, California. And so this is a video I shot while I was still back at home before traveling to California. And just join us and watch. And I hope our content is worth your time and you subscribe. Over 60% of people who watch us regularly have not subscribed. So if you're one of those, just check. I know you want to. Just check and add your name to that list. So anyway, back to our topic of the day. You know, death is not a fun topic to talk about. And some people describe death as a natural and inevitable process that we all have to go through at some point. And to me, some ways, it feels comforting to think of death as a natural ingredient of life, as opposed to this super scary thing that we are all spending every waking hour avoiding. And of course, under normal circumstances, nobody wants to die, especially if preventable death when you're young, vibrant, still doing. Nobody wants to die. All of us are doing everything possible to stay alive. But regardless of circumstance, we all have a date with death. Whether we like it or not, it's going to come. In the same way we all had a date with birth, it's coming at some point. Do I think about it? No. But when necessary, it's a topic that has to be discussed. For some diasporans, unfortunately, this date with death arrives when folks are outside Africa. There are many people who die away from home, and somehow that has to be navigated and resolved whichever way it gets resolved. So many folks that I know, typically when a death occurs, then the next logical thing is to get the community together. And most of us are part of some kind of a community association, whether it's a Kenyan thing, like we have the Kenyan American Association. There are certain groups that are more focused on gender or focused on ethnic groups like Luitu or Kuitu and things like that. So we typically address issues of death within these groups. When something happens, the groups come together and there are processes put in place to help with that. There are people who are not a part of those events, and when they die, it's a whole different process altogether. So again, when people die, the majority of folks that I've seen in the 2 decades I've been in the US tend to be returned back to the village. So that means you have to figure out how to pay for that. Now, some other folks actually get buried here. I know a lot of Kenyans or a lot of Africans who moved here, died here, and were just buried here. That happens fairly often. And then there's a small group of folks who get cremated. In my personal life, I only know one person who was cremated. And then I know another Kenyan who donated his body to science. So he died, and then his body was taken to a medical school for young folks to learn. I think that's an exciting prospect. I don't think people from my part of the world would accept anything like that. But if it was up to me, I think that would be exciting. Give your body to science, let people learn with it. And so, but I know my folks probably would put everybody else in trouble before you even consider donating even organs and things like that. So anyway, these issues of death can be resolved in multiple ways. So the burial part is what can really get complicated. Now, for folks who have joined their ancestors through burial in the motherland, the process can be very expensive and convoluted. I've been involved in these processes for many, many years, some more intimately than others. But when this happened to my close friend Millisent a few years ago, I was really in the thick of things because, unfortunately for her, she didn't have any family. And her folks in the village only knew me because I know her mom, her brothers, and all that. So I'm the only person they knew from Kenya. And, so I was right in the middle of it. Now, Millicent did not come from a family of means, as I know her, and had very few connections that you could say would help resolve some of these things. And as I mentioned to you earlier, it was just one of this afternoon where, according to her, she just felt unwell. She was actually making her ugali, felt a little weak, and then literally decided to drive herself to the hospital, thinking she was going to get it resolved and get back home. Little did she know that this was going to be her last step. She never left the hospital. Within a few days, literally, I think maybe a matter of 2 weeks or so, she could barely talk. And things just went downhill so fast, it was unbelievable. So again, without next of kin in the U.S., no designated power of attorney, and like I said, I don't think she had legal paperwork. It was really difficult figuring out who was going to pay for her care, who was going to be legally responsible to sign things. That was quite a nightmare. I had never dealt with anything like that, but it was challenging. The wonderful thing, though, is that the Kenyan community around Los Angeles and within the U.S. really came together massively. Because her case was really sad because she was a single mother living with her son, and I think her son was maybe 6 or 5 at the time. People were literally taking turns helping with the kid. So there was so much community support that came out and really helped through the difficult circumstances. And so, again, we went through all that back and forth, and then eventually, unfortunately, it became clear that Millicent was not going to survive. It got to the point where she was almost unconscious, like she was non-responsive, on tubes all over. And the doctors told us what was going on, which I will not say in the video for the purpose of privacy. But it became clear that she was not going to survive. And they needed to turn off life support, something I've never had to be involved with. So again, I won't say too much about the whole process, but eventually everything was done. She was to be taken off life support. And we went, a couple of friends, they called us. We went to the hospital and they unplugged the system. Initially, I'd never seen that, so I thought maybe if you unplug a person, then they just die right away. But apparently that doesn't happen to everybody. Some people take longer. And so they unplugged her around maybe 2 p.m. And next thing I know, I was left by myself in the hospital. Everybody left. So I sat with her from 2 p.m. till 3 a.m. in the morning when she finally took her final breath. And one of the things I learned through this process is that repatriating a body from a diaspora can be really expensive and complex, often requiring really complex procedures, specialized services, and international regulations that have to be navigated, often including things like embalming, securing a suitable casket, arranging air transport, complying with customs, working with immigration on both ends, and figuring out who is receiving the body on the other side. Now, Kenyans have the propensity of using a very specific guy that I know, who I will not mention, but I thought he was expensive. And I've heard the figures he charges for shipping bodies to Kenya. In my mind, that sounded really expensive. So what I really decided at that point was just to shop around. So I remember making phone calls. I called nearly 20 funeral homes, asking about the processes, the charges, and all that, and just telling. Some of them I would physically visit to just get the data. It took me quite a bit of work. And we were doing all of that with a group of friends too. It wasn't just me alone. It was myself and a bunch of friends calling around, visiting physically, and we were comparing notes. And those young women were just wonderful and helped with all of that. So eventually we found this very small mom and pop, I think, funeral home, which was able to receive the body. And they didn't really ask for too much. And at that time, we also worried because our names are appearing on the paperwork and we had no money at all, hoping that people are going to fundraise enough. So thankfully, the community came through, we fundraised. And so at the time, I remember the Kenyan who ships bodies, mostly for Kenyans, was asking for over $20,000 to ship the body. And we barely had 10,000. We had a little more than 10,000. So obviously we could not even afford that. But when the process was all done through this small funeral home, I believe we spent about maybe 7,000 or so. And then we had some change left, which we spent on paying fees for her kids, and then we gave the family and things like that. So eventually it worked out, but it was one of the most scary events because we were worried we could be stuck with the financial consequences. And also we had to go clear her property. She still had an apartment with things in it that had to be put in storage. And then at some point, some of them had to be disposed because, I mean, it was quite an experience. But taking a body home is really expensive, partly because the process of preparation, the transport, in fact, many airlines require embalming or other forms of preparation, very specific forms of preparation before they can actually accept a body, which can add to the cost of shipping. And so the deceased body needs to be placed in a suitable container, often a casket or some kind of a shipping container. And so thankfully the funeral home we worked with helped with all of that process, and they were incredibly nice. I mean, I've seen mortuary attendants in Kenya versus what I've had here. These guys, at least the ones that we worked with, were exceptionally professional. And then you're talking about airline fees, because you're not just shipping some kind of luggage. This is a human body where they charge you based on weight and the distance and the origin and things like that. And then you add on top of that, you have funeral home fees. And thankfully, they had some kind of a flat rate. And because of the history, because I went there and sat down with that, the owner of the funeral home explained the circumstances. And I told her, I'm just a close family friend. We're just helping. This young woman passed on and there's no... So they really found a way to make it work with us with a very tight budget in ways that we could have not done using regular means. So I still hold that funeral home dear because of just how far they were willing to go to help us coordinate with airlines, handle paperwork, and also to provide services like embalming, transportation. They even gave us a chapel to do a mini ceremony. Because that was going to cost us, because our friends wanted to come together and do some kind of a send-off ceremony. So this funeral home gave us a chapel at a very, very discounted rate that really made it work for us with the budget that we had. And then we had to deal with customs documentation. I had to call the Kenyan consulate in Los Angeles, coordinate with them, because things to do with international repatriation, sometimes involves issues with compliance, with destination country regulations, customs, and all that. And I didn't know any of that. So the embassy came through for us, and they got us the paperwork we needed. All the professional services that were to be handled were done by the funeral home. And whether you're talking about experts that manage the legal paperwork, the administrative process, and all that stuff. So all that was on the funeral home. Eventually, we were able to bring Millisent home. So I just called and made an arrangement with Chiromo Mortuary. They received it, and then the family took it from there. So I hope this was informative, folks, and let's talk about other fun topics in the next video. Thank you, and bye.